She begged him not to open the window, but the moons made her body burn. The wind outside howled like a wild beast, slamming against the small research cabin. Evan sat alone in front of his terminal, watching static on the comm screen. The storm had knocked out the antenna again, and the twin moons above made the signal worse. This moon, called Thalos 7, was cold, rocky, and nearly lifeless, but it was where he worked. He was the only human stationed here right now, maintaining climate sensors and satellite controls. He thought it would be peaceful, maybe boring, but never dangerous until tonight. He had just stood up to make some rehydrated soup when he heard it, a faint thump outside, like something had fallen. Then another thump thumped, panned, then a soft, dragging sound. He froze, spoon halfway to the water unit. There was nothing out there, right? No life forms were registered, no visitors expected. Cautiously, Evan approached the door, checked the lock, then looked through the small side window. Snow and dust swirled outside, and the twin moons lit the ground in an eerie pale glow. Then he saw her, a shape in the snow, small, curled up, not moving. He opened the door just a little, and the wind almost ripped it off its hinges. He pushed it wider and stepped outside, the cold hitting him like knives. The figure was a girl, an alien girl, maybe 17 or 18. She wore only a torn robe, no shoes, and her skin was a soft violet blue. Her hair was wet and stuck to her face, her lips trembling, her body shaking. Without thinking, he scooped her up, shocked at how light she was. She didn't resist, just whispered something in a weak voice. He couldn't understand the language yet, but it didn't sound like anger or hate. Back inside, he set her gently on a warm pad near the heater. She curled into herself like a frightened animal, shivering uncontrollably. He grabbed an emergency blanket and wrapped it around her, then ran to check the medkit and translator device. When he turned back, her eyes were open, bright gold with a faint glow. They stared straight at him, filled with something between fear and warning. She tried to sit up but winced, as if pain shot through her chest. He knelt beside her, offered water, and spoke slowly. "It's okay. You're safe now." She blinked and reached for the translator on the table, struggling to hold it. After a few seconds, it powered on, and her trembling voice came through. "Please, don't open the window." Evan stared at her, confused. "What? Why?" She pointed to the window, where the moons shone bright and full. Her hand shook, and she gasped like it hurt just to speak. "Moonlight, it burns me inside." He turned quickly to the window, checking the locks and the heavy shade that was already down. It made no sense. Moonlight wasn't dangerous, not scientifically, but then again, nothing about her made sense. He asked, "Who are you? Where did you come from?" She didn't answer, only whispered, "They left me here. I shouldn't be near the moons." Her voice cracked, and tears rolled down her cheeks, steaming slightly as they hit her skin. Evan reached for the scanner. In the medkit waved it over her temperature. 104 degrees and rising. Heart rate, unstable. Blood oxygen, normal, but the scanner couldn't identify her species. She was burning up, and he didn't know why. He brought over another blanket, but she pushed it away, her breath growing heavier. "Don't cover me. It traps the heat. It makes it worse." She was sweating now, but her skin had tiny, glowing lines, almost like circuits under the surface. He watched in shock as those glowing marks brightened and then faded again. What was she? She looked up at him again and said something that made his heart stop. "If you open that window, I won't survive the night." Evan promised, "I won't open it," but inside, he couldn't stop wondering why. What did the moons do to her body? Why did she burn in cold air and shiver like she was freezing? And most of all, what was going to happen when the moons aligned tomorrow night? He didn't know, but he was going to find out, even if it meant unlocking a secret that was never meant for human eyes. Because this wasn't just science anymore. It was something older, something dangerous, and it had come to him in the form of a girl who shivered in moonlight. Evan couldn't sleep. Even though the storm had finally started to die down, the alien girl lay curled up on the heating mat, her breath slow but uneven. Every few minutes, her body twitched, and a strange glow would flicker under her skin again. He watched her from the small couch across the room, trying to stay calm, but her words kept echoing in his head. Don't open the window. Outside, the twin moons floated in the sky like silent watchers. Too close, too bright, too alive. The room had no direct moonlight thanks to the blackout curtains. Still, Evan swore the cabin felt warmer than usual. Not the heating system, the girl was like a living furnace, burning quietly, but getting hotter with each passing hour. He stood up and went to check the control panel again. The communication link was still down, and even the emergency signal was bouncing. He was truly alone here with her. Suddenly, a sharp gasp pulled his attention back. She clutched her stomach, eyes wide open now, whispering something in her language. The translator buzzed and stuttered, barely keeping up. Too strong. Inside. Pushing. Moon pulling me. Evan rushed over and knelt beside her. Are you in pain? He asked, but she barely responded. She reached out, her hand brushing against his arm by accident. The moment they touched, a jolt ran through her like electricity. She recoiled, eyes wide in panic, and something else. Don't touch me, she breathed. Not now. Her voice was both warning and begging. He backed away, confused, not by her fear, but by his own reaction. His skin tingled where she touched him. His heart beat faster than it should have. What was happening to them? Later that night, Evan decided to check the antenna cable outside again. He wrapped a jacket around himself and slipped out the airlock door. The storm had calmed, but the wind still stung his face. He climbed to the short tower beside the cabin, adjusting the loose connection. And then it happened, just a small thing. He turned back toward the cabin, and the curtain covering the window had come loose. A sliver of moonlight now streamed into the room, right across the heating mat. His stomach dropped, and he ran. By the time he burst back inside, she was already writhing on the floor. Her blanket had fallen away, and her skin glowed like hot metal. Steam rose from her body, and her voice came in broken cries. No, no, close it. It burns, it calls. Evan grabbed the curtain and yanked it closed again, his hands shaking. The moment he did, her body started to calm, the light fading, her breathing steadying. He dropped to his knees beside her, unsure if she would live. She blinked slowly, tears in her glowing eyes, and whispered, "Why did you open it?" He didn't know how to explain it wasn't on purpose. He apologized again and again. Guilt building in his chest, she looked away and whispered something he almost didn't hear. "It's not your fault. It's me. I'm changing. The moons are inside me now." She turned her head and coughed, then added, "If it happens again, I might not be able to control myself." Evan stared at her, not sure what that meant, but in that moment, something was clear. This wasn't just an injury or sickness. This was something alive, something deep inside her body that was waking up, and the moons were only beginning to rise. What would happen when they reached their peak tomorrow night? He wasn't ready for the answer, but the girl had stopped shaking. Now she was burning in silence, and the cabin suddenly felt much too small for both of them. Evan barely moved the next morning, still seated in the corner with bloodshot eyes. He hadn't slept, afraid that if he closed his eyes even for a second, she might stop breathing. But she didn't stop. If anything, her breathing had become deeper, heavier, like something was building inside her, slow but unstoppable. She hadn't spoken since the window incident, only stared at the ceiling in silence. But her body told the truth. Her skin now shimmered with faint golden patterns, veins that glowed softly, pulsing like a second heartbeat. Evan checked the scanner again, hands trembling. Her temperature had risen past 106 degrees. No fever should be survivable at that point. But she wasn't dying. She was changing. He wiped sweat from his own face, though the room wasn't that hot, or maybe it was. The cabin had a chill, but whenever he stepped closer to her, the air felt warmer, almost like standing near a fire. Not a flame that burned wood, something ancient, something biological. She finally spoke, voice cracked and dry. "You don't know what's inside me," Evan replied gently. "Then tell me." Her eyes flicked to his deep pools of gold, now glowing like twin stars. "If I tell you, you'll leave," she said. "You should leave." He shook his head. "I already didn't." "That has to count for something." Her lips curled slightly. Almost a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "My people don't live near the twin moons. It's tradition. It's survival." Evan sat beside her, keeping his distance but close enough to hear. She continued. "During moon alignment, our blood reacts. Our senses, our heat, everything, like heat season." Evan guessed. She flinched at the word. "It's worse. The moons choose. Not us." "I don't understand," he admitted. "Are you saying you lose control?" She gave a slow nod. "We call it the calling. It starts as heat, then turns into claiming a bond, forced by biology." His mouth went dry. "With anyone?" "No," she whispered. "Only the one the moons choose." Evan's heart dropped, and he heard himself ask, "Have they chosen?" She didn't answer right away, only closed her eyes, and when she did, a single tear escaped, steaming before it hit her cheek. Evan stood up, pacing now, feeling the pressure in the room grow. Not from her, something heavier, unseen. He turned to the monitor, watched as the moons drew closer in orbit. Tomorrow night, full alignment, both at their highest point in the sky. Something inside him didn't want to believe it mattered, but his instinct screamed it did. Suddenly she sat up, breathing faster, clutching her chest. "It's getting worse," she gasped. "It's waking up." He rushed over, panicked. "What can I do?" "Nothing," she cried. "Just don't touch me, please." Unless she stopped herself, eyes wide, glowing like fire. Evan backed away, unsure what to think, but his hand still tingled from the memory of her last touch. Not pain, not fear, something warm, magnetic, and dangerous. He didn't understand it, not yet, but deep down, something ancient had stirred in her, and now, it was reaching for him too. Evan tried to distract himself by checking every system in the cabin again. Power grid. Stable. Water supply. Good. Comes. Still down, but no matter what he touched, his eyes kept drifting back to her. She hadn't moved from the mat, but the silence in the room was louder than any alarm. It wasn't just the heat, now it was the stillness, like the air was holding its breath, waiting for something to begin. He stood near the corner, sipping lukewarm protein tea, and then her voice broke the quiet, soft but heavy. "Why aren't you scared of me?" He didn't answer right away, because maybe he was. Not in the way people fear monsters or weapons, but the kind of fear that comes when you know something's happening inside you, and you don't understand it. She turned her head, the glow in her eyes dimmed for now. "You don't even know my name." Evan smiled a little. "You didn't ask mine either." She blinked, then nodded slowly. "My name is Vetra," he said. "I'm Evan." And for a second, the air felt normal again, but it didn't last. When she tried to sit up, her hand brushed the metal floor and hissed. Steam sizzled where her skin touched it, and she bit her lip hard. Evan dropped his cup and rushed forward, grabbing a cloth to protect her hand. But the moment his fingers touched hers, she gasped sharply. Not in pain. In reaction, her entire body arched slightly, eyes glowing bright again, mouth open as if she couldn't breathe. He let go instantly, backing away in panic. She held her chest, trembling, whispering, Don't do that again." "I'm sorry," he said, breathing fast. "I didn't mean to. It's not your fault." She cut in, voice shaking. "The moons, they're pushing us closer, even if we try to resist." Evan stood frozen, trying to understand what he was feeling. It wasn't just guilt or fear. Something in him stirred every time she looked at him now, like something invisible was drawing them closer. She looked at him, truly looked, and said, "My kind mate for life, when the moons choose. There's no going back." He swallowed hard, trying to keep his thoughts straight. "And you think they chose me?" She didn't answer in words. Instead, she touched her chest right over her heart, and the glow pulsed once, then faded. "I dreamed of you," she whispered, "long before I came here." Evan's mouth went dry. "You didn't even know me." "I still don't," she said, voice thin and soft, "but my blood does." Lightning cracked outside the cabin window. One of the moons was almost at the highest point now. He looked at the wall panel. Just over 20 hours, until both moons fully aligned. The pressure in the room returned, thicker than before, and he knew the choice was no longer just about survival. It was about what he was willing to face, and who he was willing to face it with. That night, the cabin didn't feel like a shelter anymore. It felt like a cage with two people trapped inside, and something invisible tightening around them. Evan tried to rest, but sleep stayed far away. Vetra was quieter now, curled in a corner near the emergency heat pad, her body glowing faintly like dying embers. She hadn't said much since earlier, only occasional soft breaths, but even without words, her presence filled the room like a silent storm. Evan paced slowly, glancing again at the external monitor. The larger moon had fully risen, and the smaller one followed close behind. The alignment would happen in just a few hours. He could feel it in his chest, like gravity was shifting, pulling everything toward something inevitable. Suddenly, a loud thud made him turn. Vetra had collapsed onto her hands and knees, breathing hard, her fingers clawing at the floor. Her skin pulsed with gold light, again brighter than ever before. He rushed to her, kneeling beside her, but didn't dare touch her this time. Her eyes fluttered open, glowing and unfocused. "I'm burning," she gasped. "It's inside me now. It wants out." "What do I do?" Evan asked, desperate. "How do I help you?" She looked at him, truly looked, and whispered, "Just stay away, or I'll lose control." But even as she said it, her body leaned closer, trembling not from fear, but something deeper. The air between them felt alive, humming. Evan's heart raced, and not from fear. Something deeper was stirring in him too. Something wild, ancient, like instinct, awakening from deep sleep. He couldn't deny it anymore. Every time she looked at him, every time her voice cracked with pain, he felt that something was pulling them together. She let out a sharp cry, grabbing the side of her neck. Glowing veins lit up from her jaw down to her collarbone. Her voice broke. "I can't stop it. I can't. The bond is forming too fast." Evan didn't understand what bond she meant until her next words. "You're the one the moons chose, Evan, and if I don't complete the bond, I'll burn from the inside." Panic filled his chest, but not from danger, from helplessness. He had no training for this, no idea what to do. She was slipping, her skin burning hot without flame, and she needed him, but not just as a caretaker or a savior. She needed something else, something the moons demanded. He reached for a wet cloth and gently touched her forehead with it. The moment their skin connected again, her eyes rolled back slightly, and a soft moan escaped her lips. She clutched his shirt not to push him away, but to hold on, and in that moment, Evan knew the line had already been crossed. Not by choice, not by logic, by nature, by moons older than human memory. Whatever Vetra was becoming, she wouldn't survive it alone, and Evan, he wasn't sure he'd survive it either. The storm outside returned with a sudden crack of thunder, but inside, something far more powerful had already begun, and there was no turning back now, only forward, into the fire. Together, the wind howled again outside, but Evan didn't hear it anymore. His focus was locked on Vetra, her body trembling, her skin glowing like molten gold beneath violet flesh. She lay against the cabin wall, breathing in shallow bursts, as if the very air burned her lungs. Everything about her had changed in the last hour. Her voice was weaker, her movements slower, but her eyes were wild now, like something ancient was staring out from behind them. He had seen pain before, but this wasn't pain. It was something more primal, something tied to survival. Every second her body resisted the moon's pull. It broke her down further, and yet she was still trying to fight it, for his sake. Her will was stronger than he could understand, but he could also see her breaking, piece by piece. She whispered something, barely a sound, and he leaned closer to hear. "I didn't want you to be the one." Evan paused, surprised. "Why?" "Because you're kind," she said, her eyes closing briefly. "And I didn't want the moons to use that against you." The air inside the cabin grew warmer. With every breath she took, he stepped back, unsure what was right anymore. "I don't care what they chose," he said. "I just want you to live." She looked up at him again, her lips trembling, then listened carefully, and for the first time, she told him the truth. Her species was one of lunar-born origin creatures, whose bodies were tied to celestial rhythms. When the twin moons aligned, it triggered an ancient biological event called the claiming. It was older than her people's memory. If left unbonded during this time, the energy inside her would overheat her core and burn her alive from the inside. But the only way to survive was to bond fully, physically and emotionally, with the one the moons had chosen. And this time, impossibly, it was him. "You were supposed to be just a technician," she said, "a human on a quiet moon, nothing more." He knelt beside her, his heartbeat thunderous in his chest. "But now I can feel your presence in my blood," she whispered. "You calm the fire, Evan. And that scares me more than the heat." He didn't speak, he couldn't. There were no protocols for this, no guidebooks, no training, just her, glowing, gasping, begging him with her eyes not to run, and him, struggling to breathe through the weight, pressing down on both of them. He reached out, slowly, carefully, and placed his hand near hers, not touching, just there. Vetra's fingers twitched, then slid toward his without meaning to. When their skin met, something inside her pulsed, her back arched slightly, and a soft cry escaped her lips. But the pain eased for the first time in hours. She leaned against him, trembling. "It's starting." The final surge. Outside, both moons were fully above the horizon now. Their light reached across the sky, glowing through the cracks in the walls, and the temperature inside the cabin began to rise, not from the storm, but from her. Vetra wasn't in control anymore, but she still had one plea left in her. "If we don't finish what the moons began, you'll watch me die, Evan." And Evan, breath caught in his throat, didn't step back this time, because the fire had already reached him too. And now, there was no turning away, not from her, not from what they'd become, together under the moons. The cabin was glowing, not from any light bulb or screen, but from her. Vetra's body pulsed with heat and color, veins lit like rivers of starlight running just beneath her skin. She clung to life in silence now, her voice gone, her strength fading. Her body no longer fought the change, it had surrendered to it, and all that was left was one fragile hope. Him, Evan, stood in the middle of the room, drenched in sweat though the temperature outside was freezing. The moons had reached their peak, twin giants hovering above like gods watching a sacred ritual. The walls vibrated softly, like even the structure could feel the pressure of what was happening. And in the center of it all lay Vetra, beautiful, broken, and burning from the inside. He knelt beside her and whispered her name. Her eyes fluttered open, golden and wet with pain, but there was no fear left in them, only trust. Even when her body trembled violently, even when her skin looked ready to split apart from the heat, she didn't ask him to leave. She only waited, hoping he'd stay, hoping he'd choose her. Evan placed both hands beside her face, his voice low, steady. "I'm here, Vetra," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time, her lips curved into something, like a smile, weak, flickering, but real. He leaned in, letting their foreheads touch. The moment their skin connected, the fire inside her changed. It didn't vanish, but it twisted into something new. Not pain, not agony, but warmth, powerful, deep, and alive. Her breathing steadied, her body relaxed into his touch. But the light kept growing, until the cabin, filled with golden glow, soft but blinding, like sunrise after centuries of darkness. He held her as her body arched one final time, and then, suddenly, stillness, no shaking, no fire, just her heartbeat, strong and steady, and her voice, barely a whisper in the glow. "You were the key all along." He stayed there, holding her, as the moon slowly began to lower in the sky. The fire was gone, the claiming had ended, but something new had been born between them, something no species, no law, no science could define. When the first rays of morning touched the edge of the sky, Vetra opened her eyes against clear, calm, and free. She looked at Evan and reached for his hand, and for once, her touch didn't burn. It warmed. Outside, the moons faded. Inside, she whispered, "Thank you for not running, even when you should have." He smiled back and said, "Maybe I was never meant to." And in that quiet cabin, on a distant moon, two beings never meant to meet sat, wrapped in silence, bound not by destiny, but by choice, and by fire that had finally found peace.